What if you could buy anything in the world, except a real connection with your own child? Alistair Croft was a man who had everything, but his immense wealth couldn't bridge the profound silence separating him from his son. He'd built a fortress of riches and resignation around a boy, so high that no one could get in. But he never, ever expected the new maid to find the one hidden key he didn't even know existed. This is the story of a father who commanded boardrooms but couldn't reach his own son, and the quiet woman who would uncover a shocking truth that money had tried to bury forever. It's a story that asks, what's the real cost of silence? Alistair Croft wasn't just rich, he was a titan of industry, a name whispered with awe in financial capitals around the globe. His mansion was a palace of glass and steel perched on a cliffside, a monument to his success. But inside those sterile, beautiful walls lived a silence that no amount of money could fill. His son, 7-year-old Leo, was the center of his world and, tragically, the source of his deepest pain. Diagnosed at a young age as profoundly and incurably deaf, Leo was like a ghost in his own home. A parade of the world's top specialists came and went. They arrived with impressive degrees and left with fat checks, all offering the same grim conclusion: the boy was unreachable. Therapies, gadgets, and an endless rotation of highly trained nannies all failed. They saw a boy who didn't respond and simply labeled him broken. For Alistair, a man who solved every problem with power and money, Leo's silence felt like a personal failure. He grieved for the son he couldn't talk to, for the laughter he'd never hear. So, his pride wounded, Alistair built that silent fortress himself, a world of perfect order where hope was a forbidden word. And then, Sarah Jones walked into this cold, silent world. She wasn't a specialist. She wasn't a high-priced nanny. She was a maid, hired to dust the priceless artifacts and polish the marble floors that echoed with emptiness. In her late 30s, Sarah was a quiet observer, her presence as gentle as a shadow. To the stern head housekeeper, Mrs. Clark, and the rest of the staff, Sarah was just another uniform, another pair of hands. She was given a simple set of rules, the most important being to remain invisible and, above all, not to disturb the delicate, silent bubble around young Leo. Sarah came from a world miles away from the Crofts' staggering wealth. She knew what loss and hardship felt like, but she also knew the strength found in quiet empathy. She was just there to do a job. But from day one, her eyes were drawn to the small, lonely boy who drifted through the grand halls like a phantom. She saw past the diagnosis and the pitying looks. She didn't see a broken child, she saw a boy who was profoundly alone. While the nannies were busy with rigid schedules that went nowhere, Sarah just watched. And she started noticing things. Small things that didn't fit the official story of a boy who could hear nothing. She noticed how Leo would flinch when a heavy oak door slammed shut at the end of a long hall. Not from the sound, but a split second later, from the vibration that shimmied through the polished floor. She saw him in the garden, mesmerized by a wind chime, his head tilted not to listen, but as if he could feel its rhythm. One afternoon, she watched him arranging blocks in his playroom. It wasn't random. He was creating patterns, tapping them in a sequence, his hands making precise, repetitive gestures. They were gestures Sarah recognized. She had a deaf cousin and had learned the basics of sign language to talk with him. What she saw in Leo's hands wasn't just fidgeting, it looked like a desperate, self-taught attempt to speak. Hesitantly, she tried to say something. She mentioned to a nanny how Leo seemed to react to the rhythm of the washing machine. The nanny just gave her a condescending smile. "It's just a vibration, dear. He can't hear." She approached Mrs. Clark, suggesting the boy's hand movements looked like signs. Mrs. Clark's reply was swift and icy: "You are a maid, Sarah. You're paid to clean, not to have opinions about Mr. Croft's son. Don't overstep again." The message was loud and clear. But Sarah couldn't let it go. The memory of her own cousin, isolated until someone learned his language, burned too brightly. Section 4, The Secret Connection. Sarah knew she was risking her job. But how could she walk away from those lonely eyes? She had to do something. So, she started her own quiet rebellion. It began with something small. One afternoon, when she knew they were alone, she saw Leo looking up at a cookie jar on a high shelf. Instead of walking by, she caught his eye and slowly, clearly, made the simple sign for cookie. Leo froze. His eyes, usually so distant, widened in pure shock. He stared at her, then at his own hands, and then, clumsily, he signed it back. A flicker of a smile, the first real one Sarah had ever seen on his face, lit up his entire world. It was a breakthrough. A tiny miracle. That one small gesture cracked the foundation of the silent fortress. Their communication became a secret game, played in stolen moments. Sarah taught him signs for play, sad, and friend. In return, Leo started showing her his world. He wasn't unreachable, he was just speaking a language nobody had bothered to learn. Through his signs, he told her about the stories in his head, his frustrations, and the crushing loneliness he felt. For the first time in his life, Leo was being heard. But for Sarah, the joy of watching him blossom was mixed with a growing dread. The more he communicated, the more certain she became that something was terribly wrong with his diagnosis. A boy this intuitive didn't fit the profile. The official story had to be a lie. Driven by a protective fire, Sarah did something she never thought she would. She started digging for the truth. Using her late-night cleaning shifts, she slipped into the one room she was only meant to dust, Alistair's home office. With trembling hands and a pounding heart, she navigated his unlocked computer. And then she found it, buried in a forgotten folder. Leo's early medical records. As she read, a cold horror washed over her. The initial diagnosis wasn't for incurable deafness at all. It was for a rare but treatable condition. But then she saw it, a note from the lead specialist, a celebrated Dr. Evans, recommending a managed, non-invasive approach. Deeper in the files, she found the truth in a string of emails. The managed approach had secured the hospital a multi-million-dollar research grant, a grant that depended on having a long-term subject with Leo's exact, incurable, condition. They weren't trying to cure him. They had a financial incentive to keep him deaf. Falsified reports, fabricated tests, it was all there. They hadn't just misdiagnosed him, they had sentenced a little boy to a lifetime of silence for profit. Before we continue with this unbelievable story, if you're finding yourself moved by the power of one person to make a difference, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss how this incredible journey ends. With the files on a USB drive, Sarah walked right past a stunned Mrs. Clark and knocked on Alistair Croft's study door. When he opened it, his face was a mask of cold fury. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Wordlessly, she plugged the drive into his laptop and pointed. Alistair's eyes scanned the first document. His face went from anger, to disbelief, to a gut-wrenching, soul-crushing realization. The emails, the fake reports, the grants, the entire web of deceit unraveled before him. He looked up at Sarah, his arrogance shattered, leaving only the raw pain of a father who had failed his child. "What have I done?" he whispered. Just then, as if on cue, Leo appeared at the doorway, looking for Sarah. Seeing his father so upset, he looked at Sarah and his hands began to move, signing, "Is Papa sad? Did I do something wrong?" Sarah knelt. "No, little one," she signed back. "Your Papa is just learning something new." Then, she looked at Alistair. "Ask him. Ask him yourself." Alistair stared at his son, really seeing him for the very first time. He didn't know the signs, but he saw the intelligence, the emotion, the whole person who had been there all along. He slowly knelt, his expensive suit creasing on the floor. "Leo," he said, his voice choked with tears. And then, the impossible happened. Leo, who had only ever communicated in his secret language with Sarah, looked at his father. He recognized the shape of his name. And with a voice, raspy from years of disuse, he whispered a single, miraculous word, Papa. That single, faint word shattered the silence in that mansion forever. In the aftermath, the full legal might of the Croft Empire came down on Dr. Evans and the hospital. But for Alastair, the public scandal was just noise. His whole world now revolved around his son. Leo finally got the proper medical treatment, and while his hearing would never be perfect, the world of sound was no longer a foreign country. More importantly, the world of communication was wide open. Sarah Jones wasn't a maid anymore. Alastair offered her a fortune, which she politely refused. Instead, she accepted a new role, as Leo's official tutor and a beloved member of their family. The great, empty mansion began to fill with new sounds. Not just Leo's slowly developing speech, but laughter. The titan of industry could now be found on the floor, clumsily learning sign language from his son, his face alight with a joy no billion-dollar deal had ever given him.